How about now, Zoom? Do you have a copy?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Zeke, you're the person I see on my screen. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Zeke Ward, the newly elected Commissioner District 2 in Mineral County.
Thank you, sir. Do we have anybody else on Zoom? Okay. I don't see the other participants. If you folks could just kind of start introducing yourself, that would be helpful. There's Marissa.
Hi, Marissa Offhand, CDOT.
Kevin Kerr, Region 5 Program Engineer.
Krista Curtis, Headquarters DTR with CDOT.
Mark Quintana, Deputy Superintendent, Section 7.
Andrew Rice, Trustee with Town of Buena Vista.
David Osborne, Division of Homeland Security, Emergency Management.
Hey, good morning. TJ Burr, CDOT, Division of Transit and Rail.
Hi, good morning. This is Medora Barnhoft with CDOT.
Kevin, I think we can see you guys now. So Kevin, I don't think you introduced yourself yet.
Kevin Curry, Region 5 Program Engineer.
Sarah Stober, I saw you earlier.
Sarah Stober, San Luis Valley Development Resources Group and Council of Governments.
Let's see. Andy Rice.
He already went.
Oh, did he? Okay. Did we get everybody?
We didn't get Jamie Graham.
Jamie who? Graham? Oh, Jamie Grimm. Maybe she stepped away.
There's somebody from the POA. Baca Grande POA.
Hi, I'm Valerie. I'm from the Baca. I'm the grant administrator, part of the Eastern San Luis Valley Trails Coalition.
Okay, introductions are complete. We have minutes from November 24th, 2024. They were included in your packet. Had a chance to look over those. I would accept a motion to approve those. Okay, we got a motion from Mr. Deacon. Can I get a second?
Good.
Thank you, Liza. Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
All right.
That didn't sound like everybody. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That sounds better.
Need
Okay.
more coffee.
Is that what it is? Okay, minutes are approved. Public comment. Do we have any public comment in the room? How about on Zoom? Do we have anybody? Okay, I'm gonna bring forward a comment that I got last week. It was from the post office and I wasn't sure who to send it to, but they were concerned about the pullouts on Highway 17 for the mailboxes. They said the ones on Highway 370 were great, whatever CDOT did for those. They were hoping that could happen on Highway 17. I didn't know where to direct that. North. North of Alamosa, yeah. It was a phone call I got, so I can.
So if you can pass that on to Tim, we'll take a look at it.
You're the contact for that? Okay. All right. If there's no further public comment, we'll move on. We have the election of chairman and vice chairman for 2025. I'm willing to do it again for 2025. Liza.
I nominate Vern Hersink for chair of the CDOT.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'm chairman again. And vice chairman is currently Gene Glover. Gene, are you willing to do it again? Anybody else want to be vice chairman? I nominate Gene Glover for vice chairman then. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. Approval of recommendations for MMOF application process. I'm listed there, but this is going to be Tim's baby.
Hugh, do you have, okay. Yeah, no problem. Anyway, just to remind folks, we are about to kick off the MMOF program for the next, it's technically for 5 fiscal years. One of them was for fiscal year 2024, which obviously we're already past. And then it goes through fiscal year 2028. This is funding for bike, ped, transit, really any type of project other than single occupancy vehicle types of projects. All of our cities, towns, counties are eligible applicants. And so at the last meeting, I believe it was voted on to form a MMOF subcommittee. That committee met last week to come up with recommendations to bring forward to the whole group. Okay, it looks like Vern's got those pulled up on the screen. So the first part of it is the application timeframe. So the idea was for draft applications to be eligible to be received starting February 1st and the whole month of February for folks to get those draft applications together. One of the requirements of this round of MMOF is that CDOT does a review of every draft application. It is intended really we're mostly looking at scope, budget, just making sure there's, everything in there makes sense, and really with the idea of all of those applications being as good as they can be by the time they get to the TPR to vote. So that review is currently scheduled for 3 weeks. After that, we would provide and we would consolidate all of our comments. That review is being done by folks at headquarters, myself, Bridget McDougall, who's our local agency engineer, is really the primary person that we're having review and comment on those applications. We would get comments back to the applicants then by March 24th. And then time to prepare the final applications, incorporate the comments received from CDOT. 17-day period from March 25th to April 11th. We would then take a couple weeks to review the final applications. And then the MMOF subcommittee would then meet again to evaluate the projects and basically come up with a selection of projects to recommend for funding, with the idea of those being presented at the May 23rd TPR meeting. So that committee would bring recommendations to this bigger group to say these are the top candidates for MMOF for this round. So as far as project eligibility, some of I don't know how much you guys have talked with counterparts, say in other TPRs. Some of them are doing different ways, and there are a couple of different ways to do it. One would be to just make brand new projects eligible. One would be to just make existing projects that need more money eligible. Really, the idea here, the committee kind of agreed that we might as well just include calls for everything, right? So if you have an existing MMOF project, an existing CDOT project that needs more money, please consider coming forward with that. Obviously, if you've got some brand new ideas, we'd like to hear those also. So once all of those applications are received, the next step would be for the committee to score those applications. So per the statute, all of the MMOF projects are intended to meet those criteria listed, which is network and modal connectivity, safety, equity, quality of life, economic impact, cost benefit ratio, have local community support, and then the application quality. It would also be a scoring factor. Another criteria that's listed in the state guidelines is greenhouse gas mitigation. In the Valley, we thought that would be hard to quantify and score applications against each other based on greenhouse gas emissions. And really the idea is all of these projects should benefit greenhouse gas emissions. So we thought it would be difficult to kind of say one's doing a better job of that than the other. That requires some pretty expensive modeling that we didn't want to burden our applicants with. So yeah, each one of the, there is a scoring sheet. Basically, I think the top two are, wait, because it's to get to 100, the top two, I think, are 15 points each. And then I think we decided cost benefit was 15 points.
Cost benefit and local community
The local community support were 15, and then the other ones were all 10 points each. So just so folks know how these applications, as you're thinking about projects, these are the criteria we're going to be looking at. These are how they're going to be scored. So think about how you can pitch your project to fit into these. And then the last thing the committee considered was the years of funding. So like we said, the funding is now been kind of officially allocated to the TPR for fiscal years 24 through 28. So that went back to, retroactively, FY24 actually started July 1st of 2023. FY28 ends June 30th of 2027. Hopefully I said that right. That's the time frame we're looking at. In that time frame, there's only 1.2 million available. Yeah, the MMOF is smaller than previous years. There was kind of an off the top that the state legislature did to go to free fare for transit for this past summer. And that money had to come from somewhere. And unfortunately for the MMOF program, that's where it came from. So there is only 1.2 million available for this entire time. With that in mind, we didn't want to just do a call for applications for, say, FY 24-25 and then do another one in a couple years. We thought to get the best projects available, let's put the whole 1.2 million out now, or basically starting February 1st. Also, with our discussions with the folks at headquarters and our business office, it's our understanding that there's really not a lot of risk of us spending this money too quickly. Like I said, technically the TPR is allocated money per year, but there's so many projects statewide, MMOF, that are well behind schedule. And again, we already are on year 2 of this 5-year call. That we don't think there's a risk of us spending that 1.2 too quickly if we go ahead and do the call for projects now. So that was the recommendations of the subcommittee that met. I believe the next thing on probably on the agenda is if there's any discussion or concerns with proceeding in that way. If not, then probably a motion to approve that procedure, and then we'll get started on the process.
Kate Garwood with Mountain Valley Transit. I just have a question. If we have an existing project,
Mhm.
it's the Antonito Alamosa route.
Okay.
We'd like to ask for funding for that again, but are you recommending we go for the next 4 years or through the cycle, or just do it 1 year at a time?
So you would need funding per year? Is that what you're?
Yes. Yeah, we received.
I think you would do one application for all of those years.
Okay.
Yeah, it will. The application form itself, and that's another thing I should have said. So if you go to CDOT, just Google CDOT-MMOF, it'll take you to the webpage that has all of a lot of information on the program. It also has the current application form.
Okay.
And on that form, it will ask you to break out your expenditures per fiscal year that you anticipate.
Okay.
So you could do it per year over this time frame, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
in one application, but you can split it out. The form has a split out per year of when you think those dollars would be spent. Yeah, absolutely. And the applications will go to mmof@state.co.us. And I recommend everybody copy me and Hugh just so we confirm that they were received.
Liza, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Liza Marin, Swatch County. I had two questions, actually. Did you recommend a cap for an application or can,
The cap, no, I mean, the cap is 1.2 million, basically, because that's as much as the valley has. I mean, I think realistically, you know, we'll see how it gets to, each project will get voted on. I can't say how the subcommittee would vote on just doing one project. But yeah, I think theoretically the cap is 1.2 million.
thank you. And then my other question is, this timeframe of July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2027, is that the timeline for completion of the project or the timeline for the money to be allocated? And then you could actually write a proposal that went beyond that timeline.
It can go beyond that as far as project completion can go beyond that. Ideally, we would want, especially since we're opening this call up now, to have basically have construction completed by the end of FY 28. But I don't think there is if we don't, for example, this last round of MMOF, we have projects that are still happening, still spending money, and we're into this next round. I don't know, Tony, you may know exactly, and maybe Medora knows who's on the call is what the hard cutoff is beyond the award date.
Hi all, this is Medora. There is no hard cutoff for these new round of MMOF funds. It'll be up to what is decided in the agreement when the project is contracted with CDOT to set up those timelines and how long it'll take for that project. We do encourage projects to use the funds earlier. That really helps the whole program when the funds are being used. And helps retain funds for the program going forward.
Yeah, so to Medora's point, right, we anticipate another round of MMOF starting with fiscal year 2029. We really don't want projects this time around that are waiting until fiscal year 2029, right? Especially if there's projects that could spend that money now. If there's projects that can't spend the money till fiscal year 2029, they probably should wait until fiscal year 2029 to apply for those funds. And if I was scoring on the committee, that's how I would look at that application.
So there is no. Can you use the mic, please, Tony?
There is no minimum or maximum, but the TPR could choose to set one, right? There's a lot of work that goes into delivering a project with CDOT funding attached to it. So making that assumption that, there's going to be some overhead, does it make sense to give someone $5,000 of MMOF funding? And it doesn't. So you could set a minimum, say projects have to be at least $25,000 or $100,000 or something like that. But my suggestion would be that you ask for a maximum amount that you think you're going to need for your project, but then show that it's scalable so that if they start looking at projects and they recognize that they can't fund all of them, they could fund a portion of a scalable project, and you're going to have a better opportunity to get some funding as opposed to no funding. And then in the application itself, make sure you hit every one of those points, because if you don't, and we have to try to interpret from the data, you might just get a 0 as opposed to partially scoring on some of those. And that's what we ran into the last round as well, was if people didn't have the information, they just didn't address it whatsoever, and they got a 0 and they didn't compete very well. So try to connect the dots for the reviewers so that they don't have to make an assumption and potentially you would get a 0 on that score. And show scalability.
Yeah.
Those are two of my recommendations.
Medora, is there a minimum in the MMOF guidelines?
There is a minimum in the guidelines,
Okay.
and it is a possibility for the TPR to set higher minimums if you so choose. The minimums are $300,000 total project cost for an infrastructure project. All non-infrastructure projects like planning or transit operations, that has a $25,000 minimum grant amount.
I thought I remembered seeing that, which is why I didn't bring it up at the
we don't have to
subcommittee, that
include
we
it.
don't have to vote on that. That's already in the guide, unless the TPR wanted to change that, but those, I don't see why the TPR would want to exclude, projects that were $300,000 or to set a higher minimum.
Any infrastructure project is going to start at 300.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Do we have any other concerns we'd like to address with Tim?
Just one clarification question. Are these federal dollars or state dollars?
These are state dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, Brian. So these can be used as a match for other federal programs, right? So a couple of years ago, we did the TAP applications, and there's some folks in this room that received TAP awards. If those projects are short, this could be used as a match for TAP. Or if Central Federal Lands has something coming up in the valley, this could be used as match for that as well.
What about like reconnecting communities? If someone was to do a project that fit that description and fit MOF?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
would work.
Yep.
Because there's still funding, I'm confirming now, but there should be at least one more funding or call for grant applications for that,
Okay, that's good to know.
similar projects.
Yeah, and with only 1.2 million available, thinking about, tying these to other potential opportunities is probably a good idea.
Okay, so we have the criteria for the San Luis Valley TPR's MMOF application process. Unless there's further discussion or questions, we'll go ahead and vote on those. And as Tim said, we have already $25,000 minimum and $300,000 infrastructure. So those are already on the table. If these are good, I would take a motion to approve these. Thank you. Get a second.
Second from Chaffey County.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, those are approved. Opens up February 1st to February 28th.
Yep.
Get your projects in.
Yeah, and if folks have any questions as you're preparing applications, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Tim. All right, next on the agenda is active transportation and transit planning, purpose and goals. And it lists you, Marissa, so.
Awesome. Well, I'll kick us off, but I will turn it very quickly to my colleague, Annalise Manvano, who is our bicycle and pedestrian program manager at CDOT. So she will be walking you through active transportation, which really translates to bicycle and pedestrian and non-motorized forms of transportation. And then co-presenting with her will be Krista Curtis with our Division of Transit and Rail to link to the transit and update you on some transit initiatives at CDOT. And then at the end, we'll kind of bring it back to where we left off at your last meeting and how it connects to your broader planning efforts and how you're updating your regional transportation plan. So kind of just to that, on that, at your last TPR meeting, you talked about you told us what your goals, your focus areas, and you updated your vision. And as part of that, especially in terms of your focus areas, we heard from you that local and interregional transit, as well as bicycle and pedestrian facilities with emphasis on first mile, last mile connections were really important to your region. So the purpose of this presentation today is to have a very targeted discussion with you about transit and active transportation, and hear from you what your ideas and priorities are in those areas. Also at your last meeting, you decided on an approach, and you told us how you wanted to go about updating your database of projects and telling us what your priority projects are from that list. So as you, as a transportation planning region, work to update your priority list and your database of projects, we hope that this presentation will be beneficial to you in terms of you being able to bring forward the best possible active transportation, transit, and complete project ideas. You'll learn about what a complete project is later in this presentation for your area. So our hope is that this will allow you to be competitive for both 10-year plan funding and other sources of funding that's available in Colorado specific to transit and active transportation. So I'm going to turn it to Annalise now, and she'll walk you through the slides.
Thanks, Marissa. Hi, everyone. As Marissa said, I'm Annalise Van Vano. I'm CDOT's Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Manager. And so I will be leading the first part of this conversation today on complete projects and on active transportation. So Marissa did a great job of kind of setting us up for the meeting purpose today. So, really our goal here is to have this very focused conversation about active transportation and transit so we can help you bring forward the best possible projects in the San Luis Valley. So we're going to review the benefits of active transportation and transit, as well as provide an update on current CDOT-led active transportation and transit initiatives and how those might correlate to your regional transportation plan update and implementation. And then we will be discussing that importance of kind of how we intentionally integrate active transportation and transit projects with roadway safety and maintenance projects and kind of looking for those opportunities. So next slide. So first off, we're going to start talking about kind of this concept of a complete project that we're thinking about. You can go to the next slide. So this concept of a complete project really is considering the needs of people and places, as well as the land use context, and developing context-sensitive solutions to improve access, mobility, and safety. So a lot of times complete projects are multimodal and integrate multiple travel modes, but they don't always have to. But really we're thinking about complete projects as being more comprehensive in addressing diverse needs, which also makes them more compelling for future funding opportunities. So just really identifying those needs early on, whether they're bike and pedestrian needs or needs to accommodate transit users, that making sure that those are included in the scope of the project early on really helps us to secure the appropriate funding sources. So this really helps those projects be competitive for inclusion in the 10-year plan, for discretionary and grant funding. And really the goal here is to maximize modal integration and improve the cost effectiveness of projects across the state. So, can you go back one slide? Yes. So some of the considerations we're thinking about when looking at complete projects is making sure we're focusing on people and their needs and experiences of all users, making sure we have equitable access to transportation options. Safety obviously is a huge priority, but also cost effectiveness and mobility. We're also looking at providing transportation choice. So making sure that we have safe, accessible streets for everyone, whether they're walking, biking, driving, or taking transit. And then also looking at current and future transportation needs and demand, looking at changes in population, technology, land use, making sure we're really taking that into consideration. And then also making sure that the projects fit with local community and environment context, and using those context-sensitive solutions that respect the character, culture, and environment of the area. So now I'm going to switch and focus on active transportation specifically before turning it over to Krista to talk about transit. So I'm going to start off with a couple definitions. So just the term active transportation, it's a little bit of a newer term that we're using. This used to be really bicycle and pedestrian, but this active transportation term is a little more inclusive. So it includes any human scale and typically human powered mode of transportation. So it includes walking, running, bicycling, rollerblading, but also using electric bikes, kick scooters or e-scooters, skateboards, wheelchairs, other personal mobility devices. So again, it's replacing the term bicycle and pedestrian as well as the term non-motorized. You know, as we've seen a huge growth in e-bikes and e-scooters and other kind of small kind of micro mobility devices that are electric powered. You know, the non-motorized term doesn't make as much sense as it used to. And also this just includes a lot of those other smaller devices that kind of operate similar to bicycles, but are not bicycles. So the next slide. Vulnerable road user is another term that we use a lot in this world. So this is a key term. So it includes pedestrians, cyclists, people using wheelchairs or other assisted mobility devices, skateboards, scooters, and other kinds of like those rideable toys, whether they're kind of electrified or not. And then also people working in roadway work zones. And, you know, this is really part of a kind of the whole safe systems approach. So this the safe systems approach really emphasizes that humans make mistakes. The human body is very vulnerable and easily hurt. And so we need many layers of protection through things like safer roads, safer driving, safer people to make sure that we can improve safety. So VRU is defined in federal law, and through that federal law, it does not include motorcyclists, though we recognize that they are also very vulnerable. The next slide, disproportionately impacted communities. So this is a term that's defined in Colorado state statute, and it's a big part of how we're looking at equity across the state. So DI communities meet one or more of the following criteria: low income, housing cost burdened, communities of color, linguistic isolation, historically marginalized communities, communities with cumulative impact, tribal lands, and mobile home parks. And so while you only need to meet one of these criteria in order to be considered a disproportionately impacted community, we did find out when we did our vulnerable road user safety assessment back in 2023 that basically the more factors that a community meets in this definition, the higher the crash rate. So the more disproportionately impacted a community is, typically the higher the crash rates and the higher the VRU crashes and fatalities. So that's a very important thing that we're thinking about as we're looking at reducing VRU fatalities and serious injuries. So why do we invest in active transportation? I just wanted to address a few of these reasons, as well as how they relate to CDOT's Policy Directive 14, which is kind of our guiding policy for the statewide transportation plan and critical goals for our Transportation Commission. So some of these are safety, increasing transportation choice, economic growth, community connections, equity, and public health. And if you go to the next slide, I have a little bit of some reasons and explanations. So with safety, we know that over 600 vulnerable road users are seriously injured or killed every year in Colorado, which is a massive increase over the last decade. It's an 80% increase from 2013. And, you know, safety is one of the biggest reasons we invest in active transportation. Also sustainably increasing transportation choice, which is another big goal area of PD 14. You know, we know that transportation causes 28 to 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And by providing active transportation options, particularly those that are able to connect people to transit, we can really help to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions while also providing people different choices and ways of getting around. For economic growth, there was a study completed in 2016 that showed that walking and biking contributed about 1.5 billion annually to Colorado's economy, mainly through equipment purchases, bicycle tourism, things like that. And also community connections. You know, we see human scaled transportation like walking and biking really helps support placemaking and community development. And it also allows for a lot more interactions between community members, which can really build that sense of a social community. For equity, like I mentioned, vulnerable road user crashes occur twice as often in DI communities. And like I mentioned on the previous slide, the more factors that DI community meets, typically the higher the crashes are. So we really see that impact in those disproportionately impacted communities. And then finally, public health is a big reason that we invest in active transportation. You know, most people in the US do not meet their CDC goals for physical activity, and active transportation infrastructure really helps people to incorporate physical activity like walking and biking into their everyday routines, which not only improves physical health, but also promotes better mental health as well. So this next slide, I'm not going to go into too many details about each of these individual grant programs, but all of the links to these programs for more information are linked in the presentation, which I'm sure Hugh can send out if he hasn't already. So this includes CDOT managed grant programs, which you guys are pretty well aware of, as well as some USDOT managed grant programs. And, you know, many of these funds are dedicated funds that can only go to active transportation. So if you're not doing active transportation projects, there's no chance of getting these funds. But you know, a lot of times these grant programs will ask in the application, you know, if the project has been included in a plan. So if you're interested in pursuing some of these funding opportunities, it's a really good idea to make sure the project is included in your regional transportation plan or in your local community plans, because that can help elevate it and make it more competitive when going after these sources of funding. And then I just wanted to highlight the last link on the slide, which is this resource, the US DOT pedestrian and bicycle funding opportunities table. This is a great resource for identifying project eligibility for different funding sources from US DOT. So it gets very detailed and specific on project types. So if you're looking for, you know, what grant opportunities are there for bicycle lanes or for sidewalks or crosswalks. Like if you have a specific project in mind, you can kind of look up the project type on this chart and see which of these USDOT funding opportunities it would qualify for. So for active transportation projects, location and context matter a lot. You know, the safest facilities are separated from motorized vehicles, and they really meet people where they're at. So you know, to look at the best locations for adding or improving active transportation, we really recommend looking for not only existing demand, you know, where people are walking and biking currently, but where there might be unmet needs. So looking at places where people would probably want to be walking if safe facilities existed. So such as schools, parks, main streets, and other commercial areas, you know, where there's lots of businesses, restaurants, places where people want to go, and also near residences. And we're also looking at places that close a network gap, and also looking at places that enhance safety, looking at existing VRU crashes or where there's been near misses, dangerous intersections, or places where there have been safety issues in the past. Also, we know that active transportation really helps to support transit use. So looking within 1 mile of existing or planned transit stops, and then again, looking at disproportionately impacted communities. All right, and so now I'm going to chat about our active transportation plan. So we're currently in the process of updating our statewide active transportation plan. This is an update to the 2012 statewide bicycle and pedestrian plan. So that one was last updated in 2015. So it's been almost a decade since we've had a new bicycle and pedestrian plan that looks at the state as a whole. So just to give you an overview of what this plan is and what it's not, I'll preface it by saying it's not a project-based plan, so we're not going to be getting down into specific projects in this plan, which is why we're really encouraging you to think about these projects for your regional transportation plans or your local community plans. But this plan is really designed to kind of be more high level, and it will be setting goals, policy recommendations, and action steps for how CDOT can best support active transportation in the state going forward. So we're hoping to be able to integrate with local and regional bicycle and pedestrian plans, as well as with other larger statewide planning initiatives. And then one of the things that we're really focused on is to create a tool that will help CDOT prioritize our own active transportation investments, and really target those investments in the places around the state that have the highest need for active transportation infrastructure.
Could I interrupt briefly right there?
Sure.
We can't see the slides on Zoom.
Oh, no.
They're not being shared. Could we request that from the meeting host, please?
Hold on, we're working on that. Sorry about that. Were you
So
able to see
sorry.
the first part of the presentation, or did they just stop?
No, they have never been available to us. They haven't been in share mode. We can only see the room of attendees.
Well,
For those
shoot.
joining on Zoom. Sorry to interrupt, but really want to see.
No, I appreciate that. I don't want to just be talking at you and have you not be able to see the slides. We worked
Thanks.
hard on these.
I had entered a couple of notes in the chat, but you probably couldn't see them. So thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for that. We'll get those slides up, and I believe they should have been shared. Were they shared ahead of time?
Yes.
Okay.
In my most recent.
All right, thanks. Okay, can you see them now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for letting us know and for stopping me before I got too in the weeds on this. All right, so next slide. So we've been meeting with stakeholders and also reviewing related plans to identify some draft goals for our active transportation plan. So pretty sure these are going to be wind up in the final version. We might tweak the wording a little bit, but in general, these 4 goal areas are the goal areas of the plan. So we're looking at safety and enhancing safety of active transportation users by reducing crashes, injuries, and fatalities. Equity, making sure that we are providing equitable access to safe and convenient active transportation facilities for all communities. And then looking at mobility choice, increasing availability, accessibility, and convenience of active transportation, and working to create a complete network that provides sustainable alternatives to driving. And then connected communities, so promoting connections among active transportation, transit, and the built environment, so that we can really maximize the impact of those investments in active transportation infrastructure and programs. So we've been doing some public involvement, and that's kind of happened in 3 different phases. So phase 1, we did a public survey on active transportation activity, barriers, facility preferences, and vision for active transportation in the state. So that was that public survey was open last summer. We had it open from June until September. I'll talk more about that in the next slide because I'll be sharing the survey results with you. And then the second phase of engagement has really revolved around the vision, the goals, the strategies as well. And then the third phase will be focused kind of on the data and the implementation plan. So we've convened a statewide community advisory committee. So this consists of local agency representatives, state agency representatives, NPO, and TPR representatives, as well as bicycle and pedestrian advocates. So we've met twice already. So we met in September as well as in December. And so we're planning to meet 2 more times with this group, and it's been really helpful. They've been very engaged and had a lot of really wonderful feedback that we've been able to incorporate into the plan. So if anyone's interested in joining for the last 2 meetings, we're happy to extend an invite. We do have several folks from the San Luis Valley, including Annie, who's been on the committee already. But if anyone else is interested in joining or listening in, just feel free to shoot me an email and I can add you to the next meeting invite. All right, and now I'm going to talk about the survey results. So if you can switch to the next slide. So we wanted to share the survey results. Like I said, this survey was open this past summer from June until September. We had over 3,000 responses from around the state. So you can see on this map, all of the responses are in red. So you can see we did have a good number in the Denver area and the Front Range, but we did get a good number of responses from the San Luis Valley. So I wanted to share those with you guys. We had 56 respondents in San Luis Valley. And I just want to emphasize before I get into sharing the results that this survey was not intended to be a random sample. It was a self-selected sample of people who were interested in taking it. We distributed through a variety of channels, including it was posted on the CDOT website. We sent out emails to different CDOT distribution lists, distributed through the stack and the TPRs. We also distributed it through events such as Bike to Work Day and Colorado Bike Month. So we tried to get it out to as many folks as possible, but just to preface it might be slightly biased towards active transportation users and people who were particularly interested in taking that survey. So for the results we saw in the San Luis Valley in your TPR, we saw that 95% of people reported having access to a vehicle and 84% had access to a bicycle. So this vehicle...
Hi, the TPR meeting is in the commissioner's room. We're here in the bicycle.
Sorry, can you mute? Thank you. Sorry about that. So we see the vehicle access percentage is pretty close to what we see in the American Community Survey for this region. And then we also asked about travel modes. So we asked respondents how often they drove, biked, walked, or took transit to reach a destination.
Let's go see the Lori last year this morning.
Excuse me, can you please mute? We're getting some feedback in the room. All right. So, sorry. So we asked respondents how often they drove, biked, walked, or took transit to reach a destination. Now I'm hearing myself. And specifically, we asked respondents to exclude recreational trips. So this was only looking at how often you walk for a specific purpose to get to a specific destination, not just walking for leisure, exercise, recreation. So we heard that nearly all of respondents drove on a daily or weekly basis. And then the next most common mode was walking, with over half of respondents walking every other day or daily, and 3/4, about 76%, walking at least once a week. And then biking was the third most common mode, with 41% of people biking at least once a week. Okay, you can go to the next slide. I know, it's so little. Yes, at least 5% of people take transit once a month. Yeah. All right, so the next slide, the next topic that the survey looked at was asking respondents how comfortable they felt using different types of pedestrian facilities. So we showed them these pictures and asked them, if you felt confident walking here, if you felt comfortable, if you would feel uncomfortable, you didn't want to walk there, or if like you would only walk there if you absolutely had no other choice. This shows the percent of respondents who felt confident or comfortable walking there. So you can see sidewalks, whether they're attached or detached, score very highly. Multi-use paths also score very highly. And then, when it comes to like a shoulder or grass or those types of facilities, they are not comfortable for the majority of people.
Were these the same questions for the entire survey? And this is, how did our San Luis Valley results compare to the greater?
They were very similar to what we saw statewide. So pretty much statewide, sidewalks were in the 90s and the multi-use paths was in the high 80s. Multi-use paths are interesting because they score higher for bicyclists than they do for pedestrians. And I think because pedestrians often don't like bikes whizzing by them, but they do score very highly. And the other ones, are typically very low. So this is pretty similar to what we saw statewide. So basically very low levels of comfort when there are not sidewalks or dedicated facilities. And looking at the bicycle facilities, so we asked them again about these different types of bicycle facilities and whether they felt confident or comfortable, or if they would never ride here or only ride here if they had to. So most respondents felt comfortable or confident biking on a multi-use path. That was the highest, the most preferred option, with a bike lane with physical separation, like a physical barrier, being the second highest. After that was a buffered bike lane. But we also saw that, at least in the San Luis Valley, folks were pretty comfortable with an on-street bike lane that had no buffer. And 41% were comfortable with sharrows on residential roads, at least. And so that's where you just have like a little bicycle symbol and you have to share the road with vehicle traffic. But then you look at highways with a shoulder or highways with no shoulder, and very, very low levels of comfort with those. And so again, these are pretty similar to what we saw statewide. This is pretty much the order that you see across the state. Most people don't find sharrows more comfortable than a protected bike lane. That's just, they're not as comfortable. But I think the sharrows and even the highway with a shoulder are slightly higher than the statewide average, which indicates that folks in the San Luis Valley, at least our respondents, were a little more comfortable with those than people across the state.
Just a quick question. Do you have and I don't know if this is part of the exercise, but is there an inventory of these existing types of features?
Yeah.
For the Valley, can we see actually how many we have right now versus other parts of the state?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have a statewide inventory of bicycle facilities. It's a little out of date. I think it was last updated in let's say 2017. So pretty out of date at this point. And we're looking into ways how we can update that on a more regular basis. But we should have that GIS data available.
Would it include all of those? Would it include all of those, whatever you call them? Modalities, or would it just be the ones on state roads?
It would just be the ones on state highways. We don't have all the GIS data for local roads.
I have a quick question on sharrows, if that's okay.
Sure.
With those, the sharrow being on the road, what is the distance between the next printed sharrow? Is there a distance in between? So if you have a long stretch, how often do you have one printed?
That's a good question. I'm not a roadway engineer and I don't do striping. So, I would have to check the manual.
It would probably be based upon speed. I don't know off the top of my head either, but we typically only use them in urban areas. And so that's something else to consider. Like, we don't typically have them out on like a highway in a rural area. They typically only are in our urban towns.
Yeah, and sharrows are really only appropriate for lower speed roads. I think maybe 35 miles per hour is the absolute maximum you should use with a sharrow. But typically sharrows are on more small local residential roads that might be 20, 25 miles an hour. So pretty somewhat limited use case for those. But yeah, sorry, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. No, I appreciate it. Um, so next, the survey asked about what people's primary barriers to walking and biking more were. And so here we saw a couple differences for this region compared with the rest of the state. So you can see here in this graph, distance and time was the biggest barrier to walking. And that is common across the state. That is hands down the biggest barrier, is that there's just people don't live in places where they are close enough to the destinations they want to go to walk. Here in the San Luis Valley, we saw that lack of sidewalk and poor sidewalk condition were the number 2 and 3 regions or 3 reasons, followed by it feels unsafe to cross major streets and too much car traffic encountered. So statewide, too much car traffic and it felt unsafe to cross major streets ranked higher than lack of sidewalk or poor sidewalk condition. So that shows that maybe out here in San Luis Valley, the issue is more of the lack of facilities rather than feeling unsafe to cross streets or too much car traffic. Those are still high, still ranked pretty highly, still top 5, but kind of the order of those top 5 is a little different here than the state. And then looking at the barriers to biking, we saw these were very similar to the statewide results. So here, the top 3 are lack of dedicated bike lanes or paths, concerns for personal safety, too much car traffic encountered, followed by distance and time and lack of bike parking. So still the top 3 reasons are similar to the statewide results for the state. Too much car traffic, lack of dedicated bike lanes, and concerns for personal safety. That was the order. So same top 3, just slightly different order. And then looking at our vision, so we asked an open-ended question to respondents. I think the wording was like, what is your vision for active transportation in Colorado? And so the majority of respondents in this region wanted to see more active transportation investment as well as more dedicated infrastructure such as separated trails. So you can see about 83% of the responses in this TPR were in support of more active transportation, but we did have a substantial number, not a smaller number, but still enough to include here, that there were some folks who really thought that the focus on active transportation infrastructure should really be confined to more metro areas or focused in more urbanized areas. And then also a few folks who wanted to limit all biking on roadways, kick bikes off the roads entirely. But really the themes that came out was really expanding the network, improving safety, reducing auto dependency. A lot of the responses mentioned specific infrastructure features that they wanted to see. So those folks who wanted to limit biking or reduce the amount of active transportation funding were in the minority. So really, we saw a lot of responses of people really emphasizing that active transportation was important in rural areas too, whether that is in the towns or wanting to be able to bike between towns. We saw several folks who were in support of that. So that wraps up my section on the active transportation. So really, I hope this information is helpful for your TPR as you develop your regional transportation plan. And with that, I will pass things over to Krista with our Division of Transit and Rail to cover transit.
Hello. Hi, TPR members. Very sorry I couldn't be there in person today, but I'm still getting over a cold. Didn't want to spread my germs across the state. So I am here to talk to you about transit and how it can fit into your regional transit plan and how that relates to our ongoing transit connection study and how you can design complete projects with transit in mind. Please, next slide. Thank you. So when setting your transit priorities, it's a good thing to keep in mind both your own TPR's transit vision and the state's transit goals. So from your own transit vision that you established back in 2019, it says here the transportation services in the region are coordinated, sustainable, and easily accessible for Valley residents and visitors. And then for the state's goals, we have the three general goals of mobility, safety, and asset management. And then there's like a little more information about those there and how we care about those. And so all of these things are important to keep in mind when prioritizing your transit projects. And it's also important to remember that transit is an important tool in your toolbox to utilize. So there are many benefits of transit depending on your community. It can help with connectivity and accessibility. It can create more affordable communities and give your residents more travel choice. In areas with more population density, we care a lot more about, reducing congestion and air pollution. But in less dense areas, it's still an important function for allowing citizens to age in place, especially. Every community has some amount of non-drivers, such as children, people with certain disabilities, and the elderly. And there's also many single vehicle families. So keeping these folks in mind will help with economic benefits. Businesses close to transit lines will have a wider pool of both customers and employees. So there are many ways to use transit to benefit your communities, and all of these are important to keep in mind when setting your transit priorities. So here is a quick overview of the transit, the fixed route transit that already exists in the San Luis Valley. You can see we have our Mountain Valley Transit in orange there, and then the Mustang routes in purple. This one doesn't show your on-demand services, but I think Chaffee County has some on-demand services. We have some human services transit providers on the next slide. So this, we already mentioned Mountain Valley Transit. They do have commuter bus and also on-demand response. And then here are your providers for human services transportation. So these are for like senior services and other on-demand service options. Next slide, please. So why are we doing this? Your regional transportation plan fulfills the FTA requirement that on-demand service providers need to do to receive federal funding. You will also need to include our transit provider survey results in the appendix of your RTP. Any infrastructure that projects that you would want to have federal funds do need to be in a plan. And here is your previous, linked in these slides, the previous human services transportation plan for your reference. So how do we go about actually updating this? What's important when we're updating the regional transportation plan? We want to make sure we're looking at your current list of transit projects and ask yourself a few questions. So have your needs changed? Are your priorities changed? Who is running the project? Do they know that? Do you have a financial plan for sustainable funding? And does that need to be updated or changed? And are any of the projects outdated and no longer a priority, can be totally removed from the list? Please let us know. And if you have new projects to add, also, yes, definitely let us know. So examples of how projects could change, scope could change. to add a feasibility study, for example. Or if you want to change the lead agency, that would need to be updated through this. And we also just want to point out that there are transit dollars to be had outside of our CDOT strategic funding or the 10-year plan funding, such as SB 230 that has additional funding opportunities. So those can fill gaps, other gaps that you have in funding transit projects. So how does your regional transportation plan fit in with the transit connection study? So your regional transportation plan is basically helping us. Your local insight is giving, and your priorities inform us in our statewide planning. We want to make sure that, we are hoping to get recommendations from the transit connection study by the end of spring, but those aren't projects that we're saying you have to do. What we're expecting from the transit connection study is more a list of gaps and in a prioritization level, saying like, this is where there's a huge need. But we're not like saying that that's a project that this agency needs to take up and this is what they need to do to fill that gap or need. We are just using the TCS as an information tool, especially to us in our statewide planning efforts. So you can use the TCS to inform your own priorities when we have it, but it definitely doesn't need to dictate what you do. And what you do is important for informing us in our statewide priorities as well. So that's just a distinction I wanted to make sure was clear. So examples of complete projects. Annalise mentioned complete projects earlier, and we just want to take a moment to talk about how that can work with transit. So, for example, if you're already doing a corridor study, you could include transit in that study by maybe looking at how heavy bus usage might affect the road condition in a certain area. Or in high traffic areas, how could adding some transit alleviate that car traffic? And then that turns your maybe more siloed corridor study into a complete project that might be more competitive for funding. Also, if you're doing road improvements, maybe you would want to add a bus bay to help with transit stops and keeping the traffic flowing, or reinforcing a bus stop area with concrete. Just some examples to keep in mind when designing complete projects. All right, and I think with that, I will hand it back to Annalise. Or I'm not sure who's taking over from here.
Is that the end of our presentations for active transportation and transit?
I think there are a couple more slides still in this presentation, but
May I interject something here?
Sure.
The entire region, from Chaffee down to Caneos, Castillo, we did a HOPE grant study that it doesn't seem you have access to here. That HOPE grant study did a lot of what you're asking about here. It did a lot of public involvement. It asked where those routes needed to be. It asked about where the routes were missing, whether they needed connection to bus staying or to just get around town, like doing laps around Alamosa, that kind of thing. If you don't have that, you're missing some really hot data from this community or this region. It is available online, called the SLV Transit Plan 2020. And that has got a huge amount of data in it for you.
Okay.
We are a step ahead because of that.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I expect that our team, the Cambridge team that is working on this with us, and George Gromke, they probably do have that data, but I'm gonna double check and make sure that they're taking that into account for this. But thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, it would be an important add to our plan.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll just wrap this up. The key takeaways we really want you to take from this active transportation and transit session is that there is specific funding for active transportation and transit that cannot go to other types of projects. So if you want to be able to utilize and access this type of funding, we highly recommend including those types of projects in your regional transportation plan. So integrating active transportation and transit elements into roadway safety maintenance projects whenever feasible can really help to make those projects more competitive, not only for Colorado 10-year plan funding in terms of greenhouse gas compliance and our PD14 evaluation and goal areas, but it also can help make you more competitive for other sources of discretionary funding and grants. So just as you work as a TPR to update that project priority list and your database of projects, we really encourage you to work with all of your regional partners and your transit agencies to really help to bring forward those active transportation, transit, multimodal projects, and really create those complete project ideas. So with that, schedule and next steps. I think this is going back to Marissa to wrap us up, or Spencer, are you taking these?
Do we want to touch on any questions on the transit and active transportation before we move on to next steps?
I just had a question about where this fits, and it may not be for today, maybe for later on. There are certain hot kind of traffic areas. I'm looking at the Canales Costilla folks here, some other folks that have kind of cattle drive traffic tied to horseback livestock movement.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to fit in VRU definition at all, which is typical. Didn't know if that was tied to accidents or not, but I think sometimes when you look at, that's a data question probably for CDOT folks, but I'm just looking at some of our more rural counties, mineral probably as well. And then the other question would be where do the Medicaid reimbursed transport providers live in the transit discussion? I think Kate and I were talking about this. There's a whole body of transportation being provided by healthcare providers in the Valley especially that are serving the same population that arguably would be using Kate's services or the transit services. And that's a part of, they're not usually a part of the TPR conversation, but it's not that they're not still providing a really important service. They're reimbursed by the federal government on the back end in a business model, but they are serving the same people. And I would argue that's a reason why some of the transit lines don't get the same participation because of the other service providers that aren't in this room and don't fit that description. So I don't know where that fits, but for a real meaningful transit discussion in some other counties, it might be something to think about. Just observation.
They really function as taxis, right?
But they get reimbursed through a
yeah.
Medicaid relationship.
But it's a tricky thing. What's happened, even at the birthing of our organization was, hey, Sam, can you take Bob over to the doctor's office? He needs to get over there. And Julie, can you take Ralph to the grocery store? That's how all these organizations started. There are quite a few in the San Luis Valley. Transit, though, is best when it connects with all of them. And one of the things don't duplicate routes, that kind of thing, like have feeders to the main routes and things like that. But we have had the San Luis Valley Regional Transit Council established at one point. It kind of dissolved for a lot of reasons, but those folks in the Medicaid realm, we do Medicaid also, but the ones, the Red Willows, the Sandy's Transit Group, whatever, anyway, they are reluctant to join this group. In your communities, if you can encourage them to work with us, we could probably have a little bit more efficient operation of transit. Instead of four vehicles going to Pueblo, maybe we could find a way to connect things, but that discussion needs to happen. And I'd offer that they're going to listen to some of you elected officials before they're going to listen to the transit agency in the room. So if you can help with that, that would be important. And around here, the only transit agency is Mountain Valley Transit. That's good and bad. It's good that we're here, but it's not including everybody else, and they should be.
I would suggest that when we had the transit council here before, we had a lot of good things going on that. We had several meetings for a long time, went really well, and then it just kind of fell apart for whatever reason. I think those people need to be at the table. We don't need to be chasing them down. They need to know that they need to come to us because they want to be part of this and they want to keep serving the valley, which we need. It needs to be more of a open-ended thing and not so redundant on services and stuff. So I think we need to concentrate on that conversation with them.
Go ahead.
Hi, Barry Van Sant, Mountain Valley Transit and TPR Transit rep now. I thought we were going to have a broader transit discussion today, not only about the private ride services that are provided by Valley-wide, Freedom Wagon, and Mountain Valley Transit does lots and lots of Alamosa on-demand rides. I mean, dozens a week of people from all over, as well as bringing, we have, what, 6 scheduled runs in the valley now from Creed and Antonito, Saguache, 2 runs out of Saguache that come down to Alamosa to provide services. And we're looking at reinvigorating the SLV Regional Transit Council, the RTC. And that was, we had Boys Club and Valley-wide and not Red Willow so much, but we had a lot of these ride services. And again, you're mixing for-profit and non-profit services. So it's complex. It's a complicated situation to get everybody to work together. And also many of these services only serve a certain segment of the population. You're a veteran or you're a Medicaid recipient or the like. And but there's a lot of services, particularly in the Alamosa area. And Mountain Valley Transit is getting these people from Creed, not Creed so much, but Del Norte and Monte Vista to town to then hook up with the on-demand services to go to get their special needs met. And we've been spending the last month, we did our homework and went through the plans, and I think, the Hope Grant and the existing plans, and have submitted those to Tim and Hugh, at least from the Mountain Valley Transit standpoint. I know Saguache County had transit stuff in there too that was submitted. But one area that I want to bring up, because I'm not sure we're going to have the discussion today, is 7 years ago, maybe 8 now, we got a Mustang Outrider route coming out of Alamosa to it connects in Salida and goes to Pueblo. And we had a study even before the Hope study, the West SLV Transit study, that was all about why don't we have an Outrider route coming up the Gun Barrel, coming over Wolf Creek, and coming up the Gun Barrel and going to north to connect to Denver and Colorado Springs and the like. And so in our plan that we submitted, and we've also talked to the folks in Region 9, they have the same project that was defined 5 years ago is still in their list, but we would like to, we've really made progress, I think, on regional travel in the TPR. I mean, there's a lot more routes than there were 5 years ago. And there's a lot more people getting moved and a lot of disadvantaged individuals are getting to where they need to be to get food or medical treatment or whatever. And it's kind of a mess logistically right now. And I think that's where we want to resurrect the Regional Transit Council to start bringing all these people back in, because all those private organizations were part of the bylaws in that Regional Transit Council. So we can sort out the kind of the logistical mess. But what we don't have any control over is the interregional transit. And it's been 7 years and we still have not had a new outrider route coming through the valley. I'm not sure, I don't have the data on the Alamosa to Pueblo route, but I don't know how successful that route is as far as numbers go.
It often leaves people at the station in Salida because it's full.
Oh, well, that's that's good. Why, that's good and bad, I guess. But we would really like to, during the conversation, during this planning period, try and get to the bottom of why we haven't had Outrider has added routes all around the state in the last 5 years. I mean, there's been several new routes added. Haven't really dug into it, but nothing has happened in the San Luis Valley as far as interregional travel in the last 5 years. So I know at Mountain Valley Transit, we consider our interregional support as part of our process. At our station in Salida, which is grossly undersized for the 20-some shuttles we have now and 18 employees, and we have 4 bus staying connections a day coming through that little office in Salida. But the bus staying is coming over Monarch. It's coming up from Alamosa, and it's going north and connecting. So we have a major intersection of interregional travel that's in Poncha or Salida now. But I know many of us have been waiting for years to see an interregional route over Wolf Creek Pass, and it could come and one over Wolf Creek north to the Gun Barrel, and one over Wolf Creek east over Levita. It's just some travel routes that we would really like to see get some attention. So, thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Don Armour, Chaffey County. So on the bus staying, I actually do have late breaking news from yesterday afternoon to report. We've also been, because of the challenges at the Salida station, where Crested Butte to Denver is the heaviest bus staying outrider traveled route. And as Kate mentioned, there's frequently riders that are left behind, and that's only the second or third stop, because it goes Crested Butte, Gunnison, Salida, and it's already full at that point in time. We reached out to CDOT Transit, and starting February 1st, there is going to be a second bus on that route. It is going to require some local match, and that is obviously a challenge. And throughout, and I think that's one of the challenges we've heard continually from CDOT Transit is, hey, we've got the budget that we've got, and if we're going to do this, we need to have some local match somehow or another. That said, this bus is also, they took it off of the Telluride to Grand Junction route because that one was not being used as much. So I suspect that there should be some room in the budget now to replace and actually use this bus, or this other bus that you're talking about from Durango to the east, following 160. So I think the biggest thing I can suggest is be active, reach out to CDOT Transit, because it is separate from these TPRs. You thinking about the Crested Butte to Denver route that goes through the Gunnison Valley TPR, then the San Luis Valley TPR, then the one whatever Park County's in, and then it through Denver as well. So yeah, so it goes through a number of TPRs, so you can't just handle it at this level. You have to go through CDOT Transit.
If I may add just a short story, it really is short. Here's how one family needs to deal with transit because they don't have a car. They drive from Leadville to they go from Leadville to the station there. We have a bus that goes from Leadville for dialysis to the hospital in Salida. So these people get on this bus, go to Salida, they stay overnight. They wait for the next bus going west or east to Pueblo. They stay overnight. Then they go up to Colorado Springs for macular degeneration shots. That's how they have to handle their medical issues. We don't have those kinds of things in these smaller communities. We don't have those specialized services. Yes, we can get, a broken leg or something like that fixed, but that's the critical piece here, is that you're dealing with people who have very little access, not choice, access. Choice means you can pick this one or that one. They don't have a choice. They have to do this, then this, then this, then this. And that's not the only story that's out there. So these bus staying connections, these coordination of services they're key, not only to cost efficiency, but to just the simple health of people in the valleys.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Liza.
Thank you. Liza Marin, Swatch County. And I don't want to derail the transit conversation, but I wanted to go back to the vulnerable road user conversation. And I really appreciate Aaron for advocating for rural agricultural regions and talking about the horseback cattle traffic. And just also to acknowledge that I think 4 of our 7 counties in this TPR have robust Amish communities, and they're very, very vulnerable users. And we have had crash stories between automobiles and buggies. And as a recreational rider as well, I just would really like that to be considered in the vulnerable road user category for our region. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we haven't heard too much about equestrians, but we have had this come up a couple times talking about the Amish community and the horse and buggies. And so yeah, that I appreciate that comment. We'll definitely include that. Because this vulnerable road user definition that we're using, it is a federal definition, but I think maybe we can look at how we can kind of tweak it to make it work best for Colorado. Because I agree that when we're thinking about active transportation users, horses, horse and buggies, that is human scaled for sure. So I think it definitely fits in there. Thank you.
Anybody else? Annalise, I had a question about you mentioned several times that communities that are disproportionately affected, poor communities have a higher incidence rate for VRUs. Is there have you identified a correlation why that is, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, but often typically those communities have seen a lot less investment, so they don't have sidewalks or bike lanes or safe active transportation infrastructure. A lot of times disproportionately impacted communities have also been the sites of pretty big highway expansions, and so that really interrupts the walkability, the bikeability. They often have really just wide roads that are high speed that are not safe for people on foot or on bike. So we did look at this a little bit more in depth in our vulnerable road user safety assessment. I'm not sure if it goes super far into the causes of it, but it does look at how the crash rates increase with the number of factors for disproportionately impacted communities. So we definitely see the increase in crashes in those communities pretty clearly with the data. We're still kind of studying to look and see what the reasoning is for that, but pretty much it's just they tend to have less active transportation infrastructure that would allow people to safely move about in those ways.
Thank you for that. Getting back to the transit discussion, it sounds like to me there's kind of a gap between the on-demand services and the just scheduled routes. You guys mentioned the Regional Transit Council, and you're hoping to get that started back up again. What can the TPR do to facilitate conversation between all the different groups we have doing on-demand services and correlating with Bustang and the other route-driven services?
I think the most important part is getting people to the meetings. So I don't have the list. We've got a list. Maybe we could send it out to the TPR members and who are we missing? And then after we announce those meetings, we should probably include you again, the TPR members on this again and say, so tell your people to get to this meeting. Here's when it is.
So there will be some Regional Transit Council meetings scheduled in the
There will-
upcoming year.
Yes, we're trying to get there. Barry and some of you know Dee Kessler, thank you.
Well, Dee moved away.
She did, but you know what?
Yeah, Barry was always there, but yeah.
She's back into it. Yeah, to our benefit. So Barry and Dee have been doing the yeoman service on this. I've been kind of on the side, but they have reorganized things and tried to figure out what we did wrong and how we can keep it going. I have to admit that part of a problem with these meetings was that we went through a couple of executive directors. We have one we're looking for again. If you know anybody who's interested in a transit executive director position in Salida, the board is taking it on right now. But anyway, that's part of the reason it fell apart, because that person was responsible for coordinating things. And anyway.
Okay, well, I would suggest that if you could share those dates with the TPR and then encourage us all to think about the on-demand services that either your county provides or other folks that you know about, try to get them looped in with that meeting, and hopefully we can try to fill in that gap.
Yeah, we set aside scheduling that meeting a month or two ago because of the TPR planning process. And so we were going to get further through this, and we figured that that would also be that this will surface during these discussions. And then, so we're looking in February to schedule kind of our first, let's get back together and figure this out meeting. So the original bylaws, or that was called Standards of Operations, was very in hindsight, was very sometimes I can't find the words. It was had a lot. It was very high. Had a high target, or a really high goal. So I think part of the lesson we've learned is we need to lower our sights a little bit and simplify it and make it easier and for people to attend and participate, and also figure out that profit nonprofit, because you're getting in a situation where people are competing or they're not competing, or that they don't feel comfortable or sharing or not. So we need to ease that out. So but we'll start to work on that soon. So we'll keep you informed.
Yeah, real quick, Barry, one thing I wanted to make you guys aware of is regionally, we are now going to hire a transit dedicated person that will work for Region 5. We've never had that position in our region. So you guys have always worked with headquarters, Division of Transit and Rail. We're hoping to have somebody hired by probably mid-February. That might work timing wise for when you reconvene the group, for this person to certainly be part of it moving forward. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Would that be comparable to a regional mobility manager? Because that was one of the things that
Well, this
was
person is
missing.
going to do transit and multimodal. So kind of everything we've talked about today.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of our regional point of contact for bike, ped, and transit.
Because regional mobility manager is one of the things that goes back to the origin of the Regional Transit Council, and it got removed for some. It didn't make its way through, but it's in our plan with Mountain Valley Transit to pursue a regional mobility manager which would be a big help, a resource that'd be really helpful. So
Okay.
that's great news.
Yeah.
No, also, I'm going to jump in. Sorry. We have a job opening in Creed for a bus driver once a week. So if anybody knows anybody in Mineral County or Creed that would like to pick up some extra income, it's Creed to Alamosa. I'm doing it right now. But I have to go from Saguache to Creed to start the route. So, but yeah, if anybody knows anybody in Mineral County or Creed, and the job pays between $18 and $22 an hour, it's not chump change, and it's a great way to serve the community and make a little side money. So, anybody, let us know, and we'll try and get somebody up there. So they can just work right out of Creed instead of coming from all over the valley to start the route. Thanks.
That may be something we have to add to our agendas in the future, Barry, is just put employment opportunities and we can all list our job openings. So today's meeting was for transit and active transportation, kind of in relation to the planning process. As we move forward with the planning process, did I hear it right that there's not extra money if you have these projects, but there's different money that may only be available to these projects? It's not like you're going to get money added on to your pot, but you may be more eligible because there's not as many of these projects, so to speak.
Yeah, so the things we really wanted to emphasize is that, PD 14 sets some goals that really relate to active transportation when looking at safety and sustainably increasing transportation choice. So looking at funding for 10-year plan, if projects are complete and have some active transportation or transit component, they might be more inclined to be selected for that 10-year plan project list, but also that there are several sources of discretionary grant funding, both at the state level and at the federal level, that are solely for active transportation and transit projects. So a little bit of both, but just really wanted you to think about getting these into your plan, because a lot of different grant funding sources, the grant application will ask if it's in a plan, whether that's a local plan or a regional plan. So just really keeping that in mind, that having them in the plan makes them more competitive for grant funding.
Do you want those in your hands, those lists? We've got a list. We've got a list that came out of the Hope Grant. That's the SLV Transit Plan for 2020. That is for separated into the separate funding pots, planning, things like that. Do you want that list from us? It's about 30 projects.
That's probably a question for the whole TPR. So where we're at, and I guess maybe this is a good time to jump into the final slide, which is the next steps in the process, right? So as far as the statewide plan, this was meeting 3 of 5. The last meeting 2, was really to go over the what we call the project long list or the project database, which is the list of kind of all of the needs in the region. Everybody's been asked to look at that list, tell us projects that they didn't need to see on the list anymore, tell us projects that weren't on the list that they wanted to see. Everybody was asked to provide those projects to Hugh and myself by January 1st. And we've gotten a lot from I think most members of the TPR, but I don't think we've gotten them from everybody. So looking at what we'll be meeting for, that will be February 27th. Really the way I view it is we kind of have two main goals. The first is to kind of officially approve that long list. So like I said, we have the existing list. Tony went over it at the last meeting. We kind of have a feel for which projects, obviously the projects that are complete can come off of it. Other projects that were discussed that don't need to stay on it anymore. So we will come up with a draft, basically new project database to present to the TPR to hopefully be voted on and approved in February 27th. That's the long list. That's the list of all the needs in the valley. That's over 100 projects, most likely. The next step is to get the next prioritized list. So that's the list of 25 projects that this last time around, and we anticipate this time around, will most likely feed into the next 10-year plan, which is when it makes it to the 10-year plan, that's when it's eligible to get strategic funds. I think what I would recommend for that process is something similar to what we're doing for MMOF, which is to get a subcommittee together to initially come up with the criteria by which those projects will be evaluated, the schedule for which they will be submitted to the TPRs, and the scoring process. And then that would be rolled out at the February 27th meeting, hopefully agreed upon with discussion, obviously, from the members. Then that committee would reconvene sometime between the February meeting and the May meeting to actually do the scoring of the projects that are received, with the idea then being presenting to this group in May. This is the recommended new prioritized list. Do we need to have further discussion, or is this good? So I think the current MMOF, we have somebody of every county. Does that work for the next prioritized list? Do folks have concerns with that?
How many representatives total did we have? Was it just one from each county?
Yeah.
County commission representatives usually.
Okay. So does everybody feel comfortable with moving forward with the same committee for the prioritized list? Okay.
Okay. So to not completely overwhelm that committee, right? It's not going to be practical for this committee to score 140 projects. It's also not going to be practical. So really, how we want to do this is a data-informed process. So what we would like to get is the top 2 to 3 projects from each municipality that they would like to see considered, and that will kind of form an unofficial candidate list, if you will. I would encourage everybody first to relook at the current list, right? Let's not reinvent the wheel. There is a current list. If those are still your priorities in your county, in your municipality, let's keep those on the list. I think one of the things the committee will certainly consider is we do want to probably hold harmless any projects on the current list that have started, or that have started to probably spend money in any way, whether it's design, planning, construction. There's resources that have gone towards the projects that are on the current priority list, and we don't want to throw the 2045 plan out the window and start over, and do that every 5 years. So look at those projects first. If those are still your priorities, just let us know that those are still your priorities. And then we'll do it from there. I think one of the things that probably should be decided at this meeting, so hearing back from Marissa's group, so Spencer, Marissa and their team, once we have that candidate list of projects, they will map all of those projects, and they will come up with a bunch of data associated with those projects. It could, everything from crash history, the drivability life of the highway, the vulnerable road user data, everything that's being considered. Really as it relates to three main categories, and those are the three categories of Policy Directive 14, which is what's going to drive the next 10-year plan. And those are safety. So everything will be evaluated for safety. Everything will be evaluated for basically fixing our current assets, right? If we have current road surfaces that need to be improved. And the last would be kind of what we're talking about here, which is transportation choice and sustainability. So all projects would be scored on all three of those. I think that's one reason we kind of wanted to have this meeting first, as Annalise touched on complete projects. Obviously, something that touches all of those things is probably going to score high, or at least get more data, right? It's ultimately going to be up to the TPR scoring committee on what scores. But at least, there will be data associated with all of those categories. My understanding is in order to, the subcommittee would probably want to meet, I know everybody's busy, probably by April. There's no current TPR meeting in April that would allow the group to meet in April. My understanding from Marissa is in order for her to complete that data analysis that the TPR would need to do the scoring, really they need to start getting these projects in their hands as quick as possible. So I don't know what a realistic time frame is for folks to, hopefully people have been thinking about this, but to get these top, say 2 to 3 projects to myself and Hugh, to then feed to Spencer and Marissa so they can start putting the data to it. I think it's up to discussion, hopefully right now, to come up with a kind of a deadline to get those projects submitted.
Okay, discussion on that. I guess I'll start with just, so we already had a call kind of like for your top 5-ish, and a lot of us have put in those. So you're saying you want to.
And if those were already ranked and you have, say, 3, we can, I think, just go with say those top 3 on those lists. If they weren't ranked, maybe go ahead.
Identify those.
Go ahead and rank them.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I'm just going to be a little gnat here bugging everybody. How would you like transit addressed? Because it's cross counties, it's cross communities, it's different pots of money.
No, and that's a really good question. And so in the Southwest TPR, for example, their transit council actually gave us the prioritized list. They met separately and then gave us a prioritized list. I don't know if you guys have time to do that at this February transit council meeting.
We have our prioritized list.
Okay.
Categories.
Then
We have some planning and.
Yeah, so the current 2045 prioritized list has 5 specific transit projects. We don't know at this time around if the 10-year plan is going to have a dedicated set aside for transit, a dedicated set aside for rural paving like it did last time, or if everything's going to be lumped together. However, I would recommend that the TPR proceed the same way, which is kind of 5 transit projects on the list. So look at the 5 that are on the list. If those are not, if those don't match up with your current priorities, let us know. But if you guys have a prioritized list of your top 5 that's from the Transit Council, I would recommend sending that over. And then that can be, that may not just slide right in as the top 5.
Okay, the problem is the Transit Council hasn't been meeting.
Right.
So we put it together from Mountain Valley Transit as the group that is doing the public transit and asking for the money. We also did it though based on the Hope Grant SLV transit plan where we collected data from these communities, public involvement and all that stuff. Is that going to work for you? Is that going to work for this council? Because I don't think we've had the discussion about what those projects are here with you all.
I don't think we've had a discussion of what everybody's projects are. I mean, it's getting them on that long list, and then hopefully getting that draft out to everybody before the next meeting. And people can, like I said, hopefully in February, people will vote on and approve the overall project database that includes everybody's projects. With over 100 projects, I don't know that there'll be time to discuss everybody's specific projects. I also don't know that on the long list, that's just the identification of needs. And then you can say when you're applying for grants, yes, it's on the regional transportation plan. But it doesn't necessarily set it up to be funded through the rest of the planning process.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure where to go with this because I feel like we're not getting the elected officials on having a look at this transit list. And I'm concerned that that might not be appropriate, that we should be asking that question. What would they say the priority should be versus what we see from this study? This is elected officials should be making that decision.
If I could maybe restate that, since Region 5 is gonna get a transit planner, yay. Starting next month, where do transit or how does transit projects slot in? I think most of what we as counties and municipalities, Chaffey County and Salida, BV, Poncha, got together and created a list of 16 for our 4 counties. But we didn't include anything with transit. It was all these other infrastructure type projects. So how does transit slot into all of these on a region-wide basis? Because the only person that's probably ranked transit so far is Mountain Valley. So that's probably the question.
Yeah, we need to fix that. Sorry, Tim.
Oh, no, that's okay. So just kind of thinking off the cuff. The same process will be used to select the 5 transit projects that would be used to select the 20 other projects. So any county and or city could also submit transit projects, just like Mountain Valley will submit transit projects. And the scoring committee will then apply the data that CDOT headquarters puts to the projects and will rank them.
So if there's a project that's important to any of our local
Right.
governments, whether it's transit or not, it should already be on there. And if it's a transit one, then it should be ranked.
It would be ranked with the other,
In
it
the-
would be ranked in competition, not with the other project, but with the transit projects. Because right now we anticipate probably a different pot of money going to the transit projects than everything else.
That's the point. I guess
Okay.
what I'd like to offer then is that we could send our list to each of the elected officials in this body here, so you know what has been backed up by the data in the SLV 2020 plan, the Hope Grant study, where we did the public involvement and things, but we could send that list to you so you could consider it as well. There's something in there for every county. We made sure of that. And there are some other needs that
Sure.
are higher, but that's the best I could offer, I think.
The more you know, the better.
Gene Glover, Rio Grande County. How many times can you say that? I think it's a good idea to get this out to the counties, have the counties look at it, because if we don't see that, we won't know what we're looking at when we get it on the blank paper as far as what it affects to us directly. So I think it's a good idea to get out to us in front, let us do some homework on it. But with that said, it's got to be out to us early enough where we can actually research it and study it a little bit before we start putting all the meeting together.
Tony?
So we talked about complete projects, right? So I see this being 2 different levels of analysis. One is looking at the projects that you're going to prioritize for capital construction, the larger pot of money. Are there transit needs identified in your study or through other input that overlap with those larger projects? And that's a complete project and it's included in that bigger project. And then you've got a separate set of transit projects that are just transit standalone projects that aren't going to be competing with these larger capital construction improvement needs. So it's going to take some analysis. It's going to take looking through that long list of 100 projects, looking at your transit needs and seeing if there's any overlap. And the more time you spend to it, the better your projects are going to be able to score in that criteria analysis.
Liza, did you have a comment?
No, I just saw smoke coming out my ears. So we did list 5 transit projects in a Saguache County. We did this one Saguache County project list
that, and we're lucky to have Barry in Swatch County, but we all got together with our different municipalities and submitted this to you on December 30th. And so what I hear you saying and what I hear you saying, Kate, is, I mean, Barry, did you represent the Hope study when you came to the table and we created this list? Or do we need to redo this in Swatch County at least? For transit?
Yeah. Well, let me back up. The list that we at Mountain Valley Transit pulled together includes several of those projects in yours, the Swatch related are included. So our list, and also as when we put our transit effort into it, myself acting as the new transit rep for the SLV TPR included TPR-wide transit needs, and that's really where the discussion on the interregional transit gaps we have in the SLV TPR. Mountain Valley Transit can't do anything about that. Should support projects, but we also included several of the projects are multi-jurisdictional. They are running routes through several counties and towns, as well as promoting park and rides in various towns and counties, and promoting circular routes, additional days of travel. So it's kind of expanding growing on what we're already doing. So most of the projects that we submitted under Mountain Valley Transit, I would say it really was a pseudo regional transit council list. I mean, it was taken into account the entire region. Chaffee and the other 6 counties are all included, and it's so the individual jurisdictions that also submitted their lists, they'll probably find overlap. They'll probably see the same projects, a circular route in Alamosa, for a fixed route circular, then on-demand services in different places. So I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but I know that most of those projects are cited in some way, shape, or form in the Hope Grant study. The wording might have been changed or whatever, but the most of those projects probably can be cross-referenced in one way or another to the Hope study. But I didn't use the Hope study per se, but I know Kate did. So hope
Yes.
that helps.
What I did for Chaffee County when they had their list, they were going over the list. I took our big 30 project list and I highlighted those projects that would affect Chaffee. I will do the same for each of the other counties here. And I'm just gonna beg the question here whether we should have a transit person available on that group that is ranking the projects for the TPR. Since it's a voting member, it would have to be Barry.
On that committee, yeah.
I was going to ask the same
I
question.
think that makes sense. Yeah.
Have any of the other regions or TPRs done that? That would be, so we would have 7 representatives from each of the counties, and then a transit representative, a voting representative.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So at the February meeting, that's when we're going to approve the long list. This committee isn't going to come into effect until after that, right?
I think this committee would meet before then to kind of do the same thing we did with MMOF, which
Okay.
is to roll out.
So we need to identify that today, that group today.
We need to identify that group so they can meet and say, these are the dates that you have to, this is the scoring criteria that we're officially going to use, things like that.
Okay. So Kate made a suggestion about the scoring committee, about getting somebody from transit on that scoring committee. There hasn't been a motion put forward yet.
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion to add a transit person on the scoring committee,
Second.
and there's a second. Is there any further discussion on that? All right, all those in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I should be saying that every time, those opposed, huh? I don't even give them an option. Okay, Kate. Okay. All right, so that committee will consist of one representative from each county and a transit representative. And we'll meet at some point before the February meeting and then probably in April.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Are you guys done with all your presentation stuff?
I think we should just clarify when everybody's gonna take a look at that long list, when that's gonna be all done by.
It's my understanding the long list of projects have all been received. Is that correct? Well, they were due by January 1st. So we've got them, we'll compile everything and have it formatted for approval. The prioritized list, the committee may need to, when we meet in February or meet in, before the February meeting. That'll probably be, my guess is that basically the call for the long list projects would probably start at that February meeting, right? That's what I envision happening, is that, that will be the date that we'll start receiving them, and then the committee will make a recommendation on when they have to be received by.
For the prioritized?
For the prioritized list.
For the prioritized list, you're talking about the
top
two or three.
Top two or three
from
per
the
municipality.
The ones that we've already submitted.
From the ones that
Okay.
that are already on the database. Yep.
Okay.
There should not be new projects.
So that
for
shouldn't
the
be-
prioritized list.
That shouldn't be too hard for everybody to do. We've already got a short list and just rank them. Liza?
Yeah, and you're saying municipalities, but we also have like, the county at large.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not,
They can have a category too.
yes.
Yeah, I'm including counties in.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, anything else? That brings us to the end of our agenda. Appreciate all the CDOT folks and everybody who drove a long way to get here this morning. Thank you for coming, and everybody get home safe. We are adjourned.